Hello, beautiful friends, and welcome back to the podcast. Trauma is not a one size fits all experience. It affects each of us differently, manifesting in varied and complex ways. For some, trauma is a wound that takes years to heal, while for others, the journey to recovery can be surprisingly swift. Understanding these intricacies is crucial to fostering empathy and providing the right support for yourself or for the survivor that you know and love. In this episode, we're going to be exploring the mechanisms behind trauma, the importance of self-talk and societal support, and the impact of global events on our individual healing journeys. We'll also discuss therapeutic techniques and practical tools that can aid in the healing process and provide invaluable insights for anyone who's experienced trauma or knows someone who has. My guest today is life and relationship coach, Dr. Ray Doktor. Yes, you heard that correctly. Dr. Ray received his doctoral degree in clinical psychology, earned a master's degree in counseling psychology, and an undergraduate degree in human behavior, and his dissertation was on PTSD and trauma. For the last 27 years, he successfully helped over 6,000 clients break through limited beliefs and challenges to have better relationships, improved family life, and more success. Most recently, he's released a brand new book entitled All It Takes Is One. And if you stay tuned till the end, I'll tell you how you can potentially get your hands on a free copy. Dr. Ray, welcome to the podcast. It's such an honor to have you with us here today.
Thank you. What was pretty funny and cool was I know you took a little snippet from the book. And so as you were reading that, I was thinking, hey, that's pretty cool. And then I went, wait a minute, I wrote that. So thank you. That was awesome. That's a really great way to start out this conversation. It's as an author, at least my experience, you don't know if the work will be well received.
Mm-hmm.
And then also when you step back from it, like I didn't read it for a while,
Mm-hmm.
and you hear the words again from someone else, you kind of have almost like a new reader's experience.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. That was kind of cool. Yeah. For a while, I was like, wait a minute. Oh, I wrote that.
Awesome. Well, I would love if we could start out by having you. I know I shared a little bit about your background, but if you could tell us a little bit more about yourself and maybe how you got interested in working with trauma survivors.
Well, I had the perfect childhood. No, I grew up in a home where I had loving parents. However, my dad was in World War II, the Korean
Mm-hmm.
War, and 3 tours in Vietnam.
Wow.
So he carried a lot of that in his nervous system. And my mother, she was hiding in caves during the war, the World War II, from both the Americans and Japanese because she didn't know what was going on. And she was a little girl, and the children would sneak out to get food to bring it back into the caves.
Mm.
So you can imagine what I grew up with some of that in their nervous system.
Right.
And it shaped my life. I probably was a little bit high strung, and it led to other problems in my life, of course, like any teenager. But I dabbled with drugs and alcohol as a teenager, got into trouble like many teenagers out there. And what really created the path for this was when I got a DUI. And the counselor said, you know, Ray, I don't know if you have a drinking problem, but you definitely create problems when you drink.
Mm.
And that struck a chord with me. And
Yeah.
I started doing therapy, and I recognized I had a lot of anger. I also had a lot of stress in my life and in my body. And that's when it kind of began. And as far as working with people who are in trauma or experience PTSD, that was something I used to do earlier on in my career. I shifted a little bit, working with people in that capacity, just because it could be a lot, because
Mm-hmm.
you're holding a container, literally, for another person's emotions and projections and so forth. And we're going to talk a lot about that today. But I think this is how you say his name, Bessel van der Kolk. He wrote the book called Traumatic Stress. And I feel it was like one of the pioneer books that really understood what PTSD was and what trauma is. And then I went down a path to study under Dr. Daniel Siegel, who has written many books as well. Now his books are more geared towards working with children, but he was the one author and teacher and mentor where he kind of put it together in modern life, what it's like to live your life as a parent, what it's like to have an overstimulated nervous system, and how that can show up in relationships. So with his work, I incorporated that with what I do, and here I am today talking with you.
Great. Wow, what a story. What a story. I would love to, because I want to pull a few quotes from it. I would love if you would also tell us a little bit about the new book that you wrote, All It Takes Is One, and kind of what inspired you there to write this book.
Well, I worked with Dr. Morris Netherton for, I don't know, like over a decade. And he worked with Fritz Perls, Carl Rogers, a lot of the pioneers in the 60s who took a different approach to traditional therapy. These are people who recognize that just talking to a person can actually be contraindicated for them for their therapeutic experience, such as people would leave feeling worse and almost re-traumatize. So they had a different approach with this, such as getting into breath work, to giving their clients actionable plans so they can integrate the work. And so with that, I worked with Dr. Netherton. I started working with him in my early 20s and traveled the world with him. And his process used to take about 2 hours minimum. And you would see breakthroughs, like these amazing breakthroughs with clients. And I was always trying to figure out what the mechanism was. Like, how was it that this happened? Because what ended up happening was my sessions lasted maybe an hour and a half to an hour and 15 minutes to an hour. And more, it got shorter to where I wanted to figure out what was it? What was the key element to the healing? And first off, I'm not going to claim that's what's going to heal anyone listening to this. But what I'll say is this. If you have an overarching belief that you just can't trust people, or you have a hidden belief that you're never going to get healed, and you take that into into coaching or seeing a therapist, you're not going to be healed because your hidden belief system is going to override that. So the book is filled with ways people get stuck in the healing process. The book is filled with ways in which there are secondary gains to remain stuck, such as if a person has to forgive the perpetrator, there could be this hidden belief of that they'll hurt someone else, that there's injustice, or that the pain that this person carried in their body has, I guess you say, there's no conclusion like forgiveness to where this perpetrator got off the hook. And so I've seen this countless times. So the book truly was more of a way to kind of understand my work, to simplify it in a way where if someone wanted to work with me, if they were to buy the book and read it, they would kind of see how we work together. Or if I never worked with someone and say someone such as yourself, Kathy, were to coach someone, that you can give this book to them to see all the programming that we come into that keep us away from what we really want in life. It really points out the self-sabotaging behaviors. In fact, my girlfriend is a coach and she bought a bunch of copies, not to support me, but she thought it was really well written. And she is now giving these out to her clients as well. So it's a book for the beginner who is on this transformational path, or the more advanced student who recognizes that there's still this invisible wall he or she keeps hitting up against.
I love that. And as I've been diving into the book, I've noticed that it's definitely a book that you can glean some things from wherever you are right now and then revisit subsequently to be able to kind of, depending on where you are at that moment. So I love that about it. It's a book you can keep coming back to.
Yes, it's even, I write that, I think, in the beginning about how to use this book and how you can keep going back to it because we're always going to be working possibly through something until, say, we have nothing but positive beliefs and support on earth. As an example, here is a hidden one for a lot of parents. I should be enjoying parenting. I should be enjoying this more. And oftentimes parents will feel guilty when they're thinking to themselves, oh, I can't wait to just drop my kid off at school and
Mm,
not see he or she for a while. But where does that energy go? It's probably stuck in your body. And therefore, you feel guilty for not being, say, the best parent. And yet, we have to ask ourselves, who created the idea of being a best parent?
mm.
Where did we even get that impression? Did we watch the Brady Bunch and think that's how families really function? So many of us, by watching social media and TV and film, we've created the idea that we're not enough based off what we see, what we
Right.
see.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things that you just touched on in your explanation of the book was this idea of the mechanism behind trauma. Can you explain that a little bit more and why some experiences are harder to overcome than others?
So the mechanism in trauma, I'm going to really simplify this. Keep in mind that there are no neuroscientists out there who can 100% prove that this is how trauma happens. All they know is that when a person is experiencing some type of flashback, they're being triggered, there are parts of the brain that's activated. Okay. But no differently than if someone were watching this podcast and they were seeing me drink this kombucha, which I'm not advertising for this company, they would kind of have a moment where they might like remember drinking kombucha. And if we were to put electrodes on that person's scalp, it would show the same brain activity as if that person were actually drinking the kombucha, like some type of joy by just watching me. Well, that goes also with PTSD, or if you want to call it trauma, where we can have a thought of something, we can smell something, we can hear something, or we can be in a situation that seems similar and unhealed, such as if we got locked or the elevator didn't work when we were
Mhm,
8 years old, such as we're stuck in an elevator and they had to call out the fire department to get us, we might feel really uncomfortable in uh, closed, like really small places.
mhm,
Or we might enter someone's house. In the moment that they close the door and they lock it, we feel like alarmed because something is not integrated.
mhm,
So the best way to describe trauma or PTSD would be that it's something we experience that still causes confusion. It's not integrated. We feel out of control to whatever that thought or that feeling is. It's not always conscious. More often, it's unconscious. But it's where our brain, our consciousness is assessing our environment in that moment as unsafe. And therefore, our bodies will go into reaction. And from that reaction, we'll behave a certain way. We'll experience anger. We might start to sweat. Our breathing pattern will change. And yet, when I say those things, remember those are the symptoms of something we're experiencing by not understanding uh, what maybe had happened to us. So whatever had happened to us becomes mixed with what's happening right now.
Hmm.
Similar events that are unhealed or not understood yet, when something happens that's similarly to that, we might have a reaction. So that would be the best way to describe PTSD or trauma. And the ones that where we don't have issues, it's really simple. For in some shape or form, we made sense out of it. It could even be where our dad is drinking, he screams at us, he walks out the door, and he never comes back. And that could traumatize a lot of children. But that child who witnesses that might have an aunt or uncle who says, your dad was an alcoholic and it's not about you.
Hmm.
It's that he's struggling with his own demons. Just know you're loved and you're beautiful. And because the child is able to make sense out of that, it doesn't turn into PTSD or some type of trauma. Sure, it can influence him or her, but how others support this child could be what determines whether the child is going to actually be traumatized by it, or it's just going to be one of those experiences that they share later on in life as something from their past.
Fascinating. It's fascinating the way the brain and the body reacts to different things that we experience. And this actually leads perfectly into my next question, which there was something that you wrote in your book that says, we all have hidden beliefs influenced by our upbringing, culture, traumas, and other life experiences. These hidden beliefs, both positive and negative, help us navigate life's emotional intricacies and safeguard our well being. They can lurk in the shadows, driving our reactions until we reconcile our past and transform these limiting beliefs. I would love to dig into this and how this applies in a couple of different ways for abusive relationships in particular. First, how do you think that these past, maybe childhood traumas, perhaps lead people into later on in life getting involved in abusive relationships? And then after that, how these hidden beliefs affect their healing from their abuse after they're out?
Okay, well, as an example, if a child wasn't, say, abused or neglected, however, he or she witnessed parents fighting all the time and there was never healthy resolution, then that would be that child's reference point until they do some type of coaching or therapy. Therefore, if they were to meet uh, a partner and that partner would yell and just walk out the door, that would be normal for that person because that's what they witnessed. Okay. Another example would be this: a parent who walks in your door, even though you through your door, your bedroom door, even though you told that parent no, or uh, they when you're having conversations with your friends, they listen in. Uh, Therefore, they are establishing unhealthy boundaries. Well, you might develop unhealthy boundaries as well, where you cross other people's boundaries and also you allow others to cross your boundaries. And therefore, by allowing others to cross your boundaries, you might ignore your red flags when you recognize that this person is kind of narcissistic, doesn't really care about you. And even though you tell him or her no, they keep moving past that, just like your parent did.
Mm.
So often we'll model kind of what happened in our childhood. But to go even a little bit more, I guess you say, go into another perspective by those who can't understand why they experience a relationship with someone where this person's depressed. You can also grow up in a home where parents never fought. And you somehow think that was a good thing. And however, your parents pushed that down and there was this unhappiness. So the overarching temperature of the home was depressed. It was
Mhm.
lacking light. And you took that on literally in your nervous system. So therefore, when people share jokes with you, you might not laugh. To where when people are celebrating birthdays, you might not show a lot of enthusiasm because you didn't grow up with a lot of enthusiasm. So imagine this person is not necessarily damaged, may not have any deep psychological scars, but all they've come to know is sadness. All they've come to know is depression. So they're going to have to learn how to be happy. And I've met some of these individuals where they date sad people, and they ask me, like, why would I date this person when I have a good job, I go to the gym, I like most things about myself? And it's because this person is still kind of a vibrational match to that person. They haven't like reinvented themselves or asked the right questions to their consciousness to become much more than what they experienced and seen as a child. So I hope that explains kind of how this can happen. Now, as far as the hidden beliefs in transforming these patterns, is that what you're asking?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, so in my book, I go through steps of how you understand where these beliefs maybe came from. And in the book, I also invite you to write down uh, in your most authentic way, even if you're swearing and name calling or in blame, what your raw feelings are, such as it might be, my dad was such a fucking asshole. I can't trust the masculine. Okay. And that client might say that, or the person reading the book might say that. What is it? The next question might be, even if he is an asshole, um, what is your relationship to trust with yourself? Because there are some people who you can't trust, but ultimately you need to trust yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that process, it might be this: by saying all the time to others that I couldn't trust my dad, I stopped trusting myself and the men I'd go out with. So what would be the affirmation, the positive one, to counteract that outdated negative belief? I'm learning how to trust myself. I'm learning how to trust the process of life. I'm learning I can trust my decisions. I also trust that if I see red flags, I will say something about it. And if it doesn't expand, I can walk away. So a lot of times people who grow up with trust issues, that is it. They need to learn to develop that within. And the secondary gain they might have to keep them from doing that is it takes personal responsibility to trust yourself.
Mm.
Sometimes people remain stuck because that means that they have to get a job. They have to let go of what had happened to them and actually start seeing a therapist. They're gonna have to push through those uncomfortable feelings they run from. They're gonna have to finally face everything they've been running away from. So sometimes it's easier to say, I am this way because my dad was an asshole or abusive.
Right, right. And that we can get absolutely
You
stuck in
understand
that.
where I'm
And
coming from?
yeah, absolutely. And we
Yeah.
could get so stuck in that. And then that becomes our narrative and that becomes our belief system. So, what
Mm-hmm.
would you say to someone who's listening to this and it's like, this sounds simple, not easy, but simple, where, we just kind of change those things that we're saying to ourselves. How can people go about changing that narrative within themselves and change to that, I'm learning to trust myself?
Well, a good way to, I'll give an analogy. When I used to lead this law of attraction group, and this is when the movie The Secret came out, I created a group called The Secret Behind the Secret, because a lot of people were not attracting what they wanted. They were attracting basically who they are, how their emotions are, basically who they were consciously. And as an example, one of the exercises in the law of attraction was that if you wanted to attract something, you visualize it, like it's a home or a car or a relationship. But more often, people would try to reach even higher than that, such as, they might be thinking about uh, a um, a mansion or a huge house, And yet this person has never even owned their own apartment. So that's quite a stretch from what they truly are ready to attract. They haven't graduated to that level. So I had a different approach about it, and that was, it's very important to be 100% honest with yourself and authentic. And that is where, if you in your mind only believe that you can only like get an apartment, start with that and then gradually reach for the stars. Now let's bring all of that to trauma. Let's bring that all back to the original question. And that is, how can this be simple? Well, every individual who would read this book or listen to his podcast is at some different level. And so if you are only, if you're at the level of saying things could be better, but he's still an asshole, congratulations. At least there's some shift. If you're a little above that and you say, he did the best he can, but I'm just not going to forgive him and I'm going to get better anyway, that's another level up. Then it might be even higher than that. And that is where, I recognize I ignored my true self and it's time for me to grow. And then the next level up from that might be that I trust myself in the flow of the universe. Everyone's going to approach these exercises from where they are at. And there's a possible chance some people might get stuck. But if you have a philosophy about transformational work, that is that it's not to be rushed, that you're exactly where you're supposed to be, that it's a process, then hopefully unconditionally you can support yourself on the journey to really make this a simple process, because step by step, you should start loving more parts about yourself, more things about life. It could take time. However, if you get to the core hidden belief that has challenged you and that you remove that, you will see mountains move. And that is my hope for people when they read the book, is by being able to really just get themselves unstuck by recognizing what that core hidden belief is.
Right, right. And I think too that a lot of times when we're going through this healing process, it's called a process for a reason, but a lot of times we want to go from step A to step Z without all of the stuff in between, but that's not how it works. And a lot of times we want to see everything kind of laid out. We want to see every step and what it's going to look like, when all we really need to do is handle and deal with the next step, which is how we can shift to these different mindsets like you were just talking about. But like you said, it's not linear. Healing is not linear, and along the way, we could have those setbacks. And I know that one of the things that you talk about is even things that we wouldn't think would necessarily be related, but can trigger us, such as global uncertainty and the things that are going on in the world. Can you talk a little bit about that, and that how that can sometimes exasperate our unhealed trauma?
Yes, there's a chapter that focuses on collective healing. As an example, right now, we're going through a lot of changes, a lot of uncertainty. And those who say, had never said, I'm sorry to a parent, or didn't hear a sorry from a parent, and they also don't have a healthy relationship to death or don't understand death. During the pandemic, that was what was getting kicked up in a lot of people as well, meaning that, sure, we were trying to keep everyone safe, but underneath that was also that my parent could die, I can die. What is my true relationship to death? And so most people were projecting onto social media, and other people had a different opinion, people wearing masks, people not wearing masks, because their own uncertainty about what they feel about death, to maybe have an older parent and a assisted living home. And that would be an example where I saw that. So when I didn't just make that up, we got to that. People who have more issues with the presidential election, I'm not talking about presently, there's much more. And not only that, I don't want to trigger everyone listening to this already, but I did meet a man who was really stressed out. And this is about 20 years ago. And I discovered that he would feel this every election because there was a lot of uncertainty with his life. And yet, when we went through a deep process, he recognized that who he had become and how he lived his life, while he should care about what's going on with the government and sure that he should vote and give his opinion, he very much had some idea that the government was to take care of him, that his whole life and sense of self was it rested upon like other people. So when he connected to his own sovereignty and who he is, he no longer was triggered. He never even really cared to watch the debates and things like that. He kind of more took it as a father, a husband, to where like, okay, this is something I could pay attention to, but I'd rather pay attention to my family with an open heart. And so we have to really go to like our story, because our story, if it's unhealed, if we're not being transparent with ourselves, things around us could polarize us, and we'll work it out with that person, that stranger, and maybe even further injure ourselves and feel more confused. So in the book, I do talk about a collective healing release, but also there's language in there for us to kind of ask the right questions, such as, why would I allow this to bother me? Why, by the way, this is not, I'm going to give you an example, because this happens in the other election when Trump won. And this is, I'm not pro-Trump or I'm anti-Trump. This is specifically communicating as a professional. When Trump's face was being shown everywhere, which it still is, and the way he communicates and about, you just reach out and grab the pussy thing, you'd be surprised how many women were getting triggered by a prior rape, having their boundaries crossed, because he represented, archetypally, that type of man who just crosses boundaries and just tries to get what he wants. There are a lot of women entering therapy. A lot of my colleagues were sharing this with me. We were seeing that get kicked up. That's an example, because the Harvey Weinstein case, same thing. For women who, whether they were raped or not, they what was getting kicked up was, oh, I remember getting drunk in college and waking up and my clothes was off. And I didn't go to therapy for that, too. What happened? Like, a lot of things got kicked up. So it's important to recognize that, like, when we feel something, that's us. It's not coming from something else outside of us. When we feel emotions running through our body, that's coming through the way we interpret information in social media and everywhere around us. So it's important for us to question, what is this filtering system? Why am I interpreting this experience this way? What do I need to heal to? Is there something I could do to reframe this, to experience this differently? How can I take personal responsibility for my psyche, personal responsibility for my unhealed trauma, personal responsibility for how I feel and how I want to be this day anyway, even though I don't say like this asshole I'm seeing on TV. I mean, that is true empowerment, and that's true taking personal responsibility, because at the end of the day, again, there's always going to be things around us that we perceive as negative. But how do we interpret it anyway, positively in our body, or at least neutral, so we can still show up with our hearts open, show up smiling in front of our children, and be clear with what's ours and what is happening outside of ourselves.
Yeah, there's so much there that we could dig into. That's a lot to unpack. But I would
Mhm.
love to maybe talk about some of the practical tools or activities or exercises that you use with your clients and your patients to help them to integrate their experiences and begin healing.
So first, I want to clarify here that I do not do therapy. I do coaching, so I don't
Okay.
diagnose. And there's a reason why I say that, because the modalities I use are not traditional. As an example, if a person were really stressed out and they're just not receptive, I might take that person out to a park, or I have many trees in my property, to where they just lean up against a tree. And there's an exercise called the Tree of Awareness exercise that's in my book. And it's also guided. If you go on my website, you can get a recording of it, where a person, a client, will connect to the tree and breathe in his or her body to calm their nervous system, so they're more open. They're able to unwind a little bit. And therefore, when we start talking about what's happening and what they want to work on, they are now looking at it from a higher perspective. They're not communicating from the pain body of a stressed nervous system. So that might be a technique just as an opening. Or I might incorporate some type of breath work where the person's eyes are closed and they're relaxing their nervous system. And as they're relaxing their nervous system, keep in mind that their body and their consciousness is inevitably going to relax a little bit, to where I can ask maybe the question, if you were to feel better, what would that look like, based off of what you're trying to get away from? Now, listen carefully to what I just said. In order for a person to shift their awareness, there's got to be a part of them that can see the pain story, and also part of them that can see a different reality they prefer. If they're able to do both in that moment, that means already their consciousness is ready to shift. A person who's in deep anger or depression, they'll just remain stuck there. A person who sees it objectively can see choices.
Hmm.
Does that make sense? So
Yes.
those are some of the processes. I mean, it's hard to articulate what happens in the experience. However, that kind of gives you kind of the idea of maybe what it could look like. And I'll share another one. So a big issue for, I would say, many people is trust. Okay, trust.
Hmm.
So imagine a client coming in and saying, or seeing me through a Zoom session, and they say, I want to meet the man of my dreams, but just can't trust men. I just can't trust. I've been cheated on. My dad cheated on my mother. I just can't trust. Now, listen to what they're saying. I just can't trust. I just can't trust. What's interesting about even that word trust is that it means something different for every individual. Okay.
Hmm. Hmm.
And a lot of times we don't even look at our relationship to the word trust. Okay. So that person, I might have them repeat that. I don't trust this. I don't trust that. Then I have them focus on, what does trust mean to you, though? Not others, to you. And oftentimes what you'll hear is they can't even talk about themselves. It's always trust in others, to where they've created kind of like a codependent relationship on others to trust themselves, such as, if the day's great, I'll trust myself. If he's great, I'll trust myself. If he's not great, I won't trust myself. They recognize, wait a minute, I have never asked the question, do I trust myself today? Or what is my relationship to trust? And if I did trust myself, how would it actually feel in my body? Would it feel good? What does trust mean to me? Because if I trust that the sun's going to come out, and I don't even think about that when I go to sleep at night, well, what would that be like to be in a relationship with a person and trusting that, you know, there'll be new days and there'll be good and bad times, but I trust I can be myself. It's These are different tools I use with my clients, and a lot of those are in the book as well.
That's great. Do you have any success stories that you can share that of people who have experienced this significant healing in maybe a short period of time?
What's funny is I'm starting to write down the success stories. They're scattered after buying different computers, and it's funny how like my consciousness has shifted, and due to that, um, even like when we start to shift and evolve, we don't remember people, places, and things, even case studies. And it's not because it's hidden now or we swept it under the rug, but we just stop remembering things, and that's kind of funny. I'm only saying this also, and I'll give you a case study. Is that when you start truly loving who you are and your nervous system relax and you trust that you can let go of what had happened and that story leaves your body, you will you won't remember those people, places, and things anymore. As an example, now to the case study. I worked with a person who wanted to stop smoking cigarettes, and there was other stuff also. I'm not going to get into that, but this is really cool. So, when we were doing a healing process, meaning that we were working on her childhood and she was adopted, and we did a rebirthing session. And I'll give you a little teaser of that. So we did a rebirthing session where her mother had given her up. She was adopted. But in that session, she remembered that she didn't feel like she was going to live, that this person, this mother who she had not bonded with, had left. And in that experience where she was in that rebirthing session, uh, she just really thought she was going to die, and she couldn't trust anyone, and that she was all alone. And even though she was adopted and had loving parents, there was this part of herself that never felt safe, even though her parents said, I love you, you're gorgeous, and so forth. But she just had this underlying feeling that she was never safe. And so she came to me with the story. And what she didn't know was this: she almost died at birth.
Hmm.
She literally remembered hearing the nurse and doctors talk to the parents, or the parents saying that she might not make it. And
Wow.
even where you should say your prayers or whatever. And so in a way, I guess she kind of was in an altered state, or almost like a coma. And through the breath work we did, she recognized, wait a minute, I have had this belief that I was going to die the whole time, and I never got rid of that old program. No one said you're alive. No one said that you're going to be healthy. It's where she recorded through this experience that someone left me, I'm left to die. And that was just part of her whole living. So what she did in that process was she recognized, when we went through a rebirthing session, we went through some breath work, she ended up claiming her own rebirth. I'm alive. I'm here. She literally went through this, we went through the experience of coming out of her mother, and her imagining the staff saying you're alive, you're happy, and so forth. And she rebirthed herself. And that heavy feeling, even having loving parents, went away. She no longer was fearful of her life. But here's the thing, how that connects to the cigarettes. So for whatever reason, that would calm her, smoking cigarettes.
Mm-hmm.
So the cigarettes was just kind of a way to feel alive or feel grounded or something to fixate on, whether it was a nipple. We don't know. We don't care. Well, not only did she stop smoking cigarettes as well after the session, she started forgetting all the teenagers she hung out with who like got her to start smoking. Like her consciousness started to shift. She became a different person to all those outdated narratives that say influenced her in an unhealthy way. The people that were in her life, she forgot a lot of names in those stories because she became truly that integrated new consciousness. And that's what this really means when we say, remember who you are. And remembering who you are is when you're closest to your soul. Remembering who you are is when you're the closest to God, source energy, or whatever you want to call it. And so she no longer was bound by the trauma during birth and the adoption. And she was no longer that person who was hurt, who learned how to smoke to cope with it. She was no longer that person. So the addiction went away as well.
That is so incredible. It's crazy the way we can hold on to these
Mm-hmm.
things that they're not even conscious to us a lot of times, and how that affects so many other things. Because I think if you had started out saying this woman wanted to stop smoking, and she was adopted, how did those two things connect? But when you dig in and you see exactly what happened and play out that story, it's crazy. It's very cool and very interesting and fascinating work. I
Yeah, the
love that.
smoking was a side thing. In fact, I don't work with addictions. I never cared for phobias and things. It wasn't an interest of mine, but it just went away also. She reached out to me. She just said, like, I just have this gloomy feeling. I feel like I'm not going to live, or I have a good life, but somehow I feel like I was abandoned. Like, just, I don't know what it is. And it
Right.
was everything in her birth and adoption, and then also the staff members. Basically, she's unconscious, saying that she's not going to live, she's going to die. Say your prayers now.
Also so crazy that something like that she could have that memory deep within her subconscious from, I mean, most people don't remember anything from obviously
Yes,
the day that they're born, but yeah.
people can also romanticize the idea that it'd be great to have that type of memory, or having that type of memory is what could lead to actually healing. But here's the truth: what if none of that even happened, and she basically was drawn a connection to another person who went through that, and that was her psyche or her soul guiding her to through that reflection and experience to help heal her? It doesn't really matter.
Right. Wow. Wow. I would love to know, in your opinion, how can we better educate the public about trauma and the needs of survivors in order to foster a more supportive environment? Because obviously it's important to have good people around us and a good support system, whether that be friends, families, professionals, and all of that. And I feel like trauma, if you haven't been through it, a lot of times is misunderstood. So how can we change that?
Well, the way that trauma is being discussed, particularly online, is a lot of pseudo information. So you can hear and sense from my beliefs that I probably don't subscribe to many of them. Like as an example, it seems like in the 90s, everyone had ADD or something, like it just popped up. And so I feel as though that trauma could be some of that as well. Like everyone seems to be traumatized. Everyone's traumatized after the pandemic or all this chaos on our planet. But what people are not asking is this: how good are my coping skills?
Hmm.
How 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 positively do I look at my life? How certain do I feel about my future? Do I have unhealthy attachments to the future? What is truly my belief and spirituality? And I'm sharing this with you, Kathy, because trauma is this idea that it can happen to you, or trauma is this idea that it's in your body and therefore it holds you back from living your life. But that's not 100% true. It's again what I mentioned in the beginning of this video. It's how whatever you're experiencing in your life right now, or you believe that's in the past, that you can't let go of. You can't forgive yourself or them, it still doesn't make sense to you, that you keep allowing your monkey mind to worry about something that you shouldn't worry about. Your nervous system is stressed out, therefore, you can't create a new experience or better feeling. So by asking ourselves these questions, sure, I got traumatized by the past. It's okay to agree to that. Or in this moment, I feel very uncertain. I can't pay my bills. I don't know what's going to happen right now. That's true. That could be very stressful. But why is it that people from the past, including my father, even had less resources managed?
Mm.
Isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Why is it that people were able to move past things and it not lead to PTSD and so forth? And again, we have changed our coping mechanisms. We have created a culture where we feel as though uh, that children are maybe like weak or not resilient. We've created a narrative that, you know, that we don't feel, unless someone honors our emotions, we're not safe. It's very important to recognize that truly the reason why a lot of people are getting traumatized right now is because they're poor coping mechanisms. It's their poor interpersonal relationships. It's feeling anger and just going on your phone and checking out or trying to hook up with another person. It's not staying within the body to feel what's coming up and knowing that it will pass. It's not developing a healthy relationship to our emotions. If this sounds a little bit too esoteric or out there, it'd be like this. My son is extremely confident. He doesn't cry a lot. And not because I created a narrative that you're a pussy for crying. It's that early on when he would get hurt, and maybe there was a moment where he's tearing up or something's happening, I might ask these three questions depending on the situation. Does it hurt? Was it shock? Uh, or like, is it how you're thinking about that you made a mistake? Meaning that, like, I'm just kind of making this up in the moment, but I would give my son, when he would get hurt or something wouldn't go his way, I would help him feel something, but also be aware of the way he pays attention to the emotions. He might discover that it's not really pain; it's that he feels embarrassed that he fell down.
Mm-hmm.
That or if he's feeling pain, he can. I've taught him how to breathe through pain. He does it. It's amazing. So I've helped him become comfortable with discomfort. I've helped him become comfortable with discomfort. And it's important that we start teaching these skills again.
I agree completely. And, this goes back to what you were saying earlier about personal responsibility and
Yeah.
just how important that is in the healing process and being able to, there's so much in this world that we cannot control. But
Mhm.
if we control the controllables, this is, I think, how we
Yeah.
move forward.
That's a nickel word there. Control the controllables. And that's taking personal responsibility. People don't understand that because we choose how to feel. And whether we're conscious of it yet or not, by just becoming aware that, hey, wait a minute, this is an emotion and it's okay. Is it okay? Is it valid? Do I want to let it pass through my body? Do I want to do something about it? It pulls you out of reaction and it helps you create healthier choices and also helps you integrate, say, that shitty moment.
Hmm.
So it doesn't get stuck in your body and eventually turns into PTSD.
Right. Wow. Wow. Um, as we kind of start to wrap up a little bit, gosh, I feel like we could go on for hours. There's so much to talk about here that we unfortunately can't get to. But near the end of your book, you wrote, What could we become when we transcend our old mental programming? How does our purpose transform, and what new meanings do we discover in life when we awaken from the matrix and realize with renewed self awareness that life offers more than what we've been conditioned to believe? And this perfectly explains what this podcast is about, moving past the things that have happened to us and
Mhm.
building the beautiful life we were created to live. So, with that said, what message of hope or encouragement would you like to share with survivors of abuse who may be listening to this podcast today?
So you're beautiful. Uh, that the trauma doesn't define you, nor should we ever look at trauma as a totality of who we are. And that every person who I have met, whether as a colleague or as a client, who have become really powerful, badass people, every one of them had to move through something traumatic. No one has been given some, I don't know, keys to the universe with ease. And that if you're experiencing discomfort and pain, still, it's just because you're still in the story, and the way that you're looking at the story might not be from a positive lens. And the more you're challenged with letting that thing go, just remember that has a vibration to it, has a resonance to that. And I call that resistance. And in a way, how you pay attention to it is also you getting in your own way. So by simply just recognizing that you don't have to overthink it and maybe just think funny thoughts and get your nails done to experience yourself in nature and looking at a flower and allowing yourself, losing yourself in a flower. The simple things in life are there to remind you who you really are. Don't allow one thing that happened, even if it was 20 times, if you were to calculate all the minutes and whatever you experienced that to how much you really lived, you might recognize that all those things couldn't define me. All of those things didn't define me. It might be because of how I've been paying attention to it. And so if I can pay attention to it in a better way, there's a good chance things will start to alleviate in my body. And also, if I start paying attention to the things I really want more, that my life will start matching that. My nervous system will calm down and I'll experience more joy and happiness in my life anyway.
I love that. I love that. On a more personal note, I would love to know, through your work and your writing of this book, what have you learned about yourself, and what are you most proud of?
What I learned about myself the most is that I just like to be creative and I like to express. So after the book was written, I already have book 2 and 3 in the works. In fact,
Great.
the ending of book 2 is of book 1 the last chapter leads into book 2 and more of a spiritual partnership and what it's like to be that way and walk on that path. So I learned that like I'm just a creator. So the book was cool, but I really liked the process more than anything else. And that's something I learned. And what was the other question to that? Was a part to that question?
What are you most proud of?
Well, today it was last night. So it's where I'm at right now. It's high. There's a lot of allergies, like a lot of pollen. Sorry, and like my nose is plugged. I can feel it. In fact, I'm moving around a lot because I'm sitting down. I'm usually standing, but I'm a little bit congested. So I just wanted to sit down and relax. But my son experienced it also last night, and I didn't know this, and he will turn 10 in July, and I asked him if he wanted something for it to help him. He said, "No, I got up and took it myself." Like he went in the cabinet and got it. And I got emotional because he's so independent. And I would say I was telling my female friend today, I said, I know this is a generalization. I said, but a lot of parents will talk about how their child melted their heart by writing a card that says, I love you, even if it was helped by a teacher or by some artwork. They kind of brag about like this, usually art or the clothes. And I found it to be really funny that I got really emotional for the fact that my son is so independent. I got really, I'm like, oh my God, he's independent like me. I raised a really freaking healthy, masculine young boy who takes personal responsibility. He literally does. He will tell you, I did it. I did it. I made that mistake. I'm sorry. So he's a reflection of myself. He's a reflection of his grandfather. So that is the one thing I'm proud about. Yeah.
That's great.
And
That's
I,
definitely something to be proud of.
yeah, and I'm not necessarily proud of myself because I don't honestly, it's for me, it's more, I am more interested in the outcome. My
Mhm.
parenting is not about me. I'm here to guide a young individual to be a great leader, to be the best version of himself. So the result of it, that excites me. I really don't give a shit about the reflection about myself. Even my book, people are like, that was really amazing. It's a really well written book. There's a lot of great reviews. How do you feel about that? My response is this: the reviews really felt good because readers are saying it changed their life. Like it's working for them. So it's one thing to have a book. I should have it here so I can put it up once in a while, but it's the result. It's that it's helping a person change their life. That excites me. So I'm here as in service to others.
Right. Great. Well, where is the best place for people to find you if they want to work with you or learn more about what it is that you're doing?
So the best place to find me is just my website, which is raydoktor.com. My website, raydoktor.com. I'm always doing interesting things there. I'm sure you will provide the link there and
Hmm.
link for my book as well. And I also have a group that I'm starting, which we have finalized actually a couple of days ago. And so, if depending on when a person listens to this, if they go to my website, there will be a link for that group, and you can see live coaching in action. You can. It's not just hearing this conversation; it's where you can participate, you can listen, and so forth. But it's a group experience.
Great. And yes, I will link all of that in the show notes. And so people will be able to easily find you and see what you're doing. My final question is one I like to ask all of my guests, and I love to hear the answers that come in. What is your definition of tragically beautiful?
For some reason, when you asked that question, there was it cut out a little bit. Could you ask the question again?
Sure. What is your definition of tragically beautiful?
Uh, when when my mother was on her deathbed, and we all agreed that it was her free will, she wanted to go. At that time, my dad was not even able to walk. He became emaciated, and he had a stroke. And when he heard the caregivers talking about that we were all going to the hospital, his body just got up, like as if
Mm.
spirit was carrying him. He said, I gotta go. Sorry, I get emotional about it. And yeah, they could. It was like as if my dad was dead prior to that. All of a sudden, he's like putting on his pants, like as if he was no
Wow.
longer an unhealthy person. And they drove him to uh, the hospital, and it was he. My mom was in ICU, And I walked in there. I didn't allow my dad to see me at first, and they only allowed two people at a time. My dad was firm, and he had his hand on my mom's chest, and she wasn't conscious, but he was just firm, like a Marine, like a strong man. And it was like a notebook experience. And I just watched him and my mom for about 5 minutes. And yeah, one of the most beautiful things to ever see and witness.
Hmm. That's incredibly beautiful. Wow.
Yeah.
What a story.
Yeah, it still gets me. It's like that happened in 2019. And I have I'm very close to my parents. I still experience them. It's kind of a trip. I had someone work with me, and my mother came through. She's a channeler, and it was really cool, and it really moved me. So, in other words, I'm beyond what had happened. I have a very healthy relationship to death. However, when I still talk about that story, it's not sadness I connect to. It's just
Hmm.
beauty of love, of like my parents' love and
Right.
my father's strength
Hmm.
and spirit moving through him to show up.
That's amazing. Well, Dr. Ray, I cannot thank you enough for being a guest here today and sharing your expertise and your wisdom on this very tough topic. And I know it's going to touch so many people and help them grow through and beyond what they've experienced in life. So thank you so, so much for being my guest here today. I really, really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it.